Hi guys, welcome here. Today what we're going to be talking about is conditionals. So this is one of the big three things whenever we're talking about computer programming and what we're going to learn this year. So we talked about variables and how to create them. We've talked about loops in a different video, and now here we're talking about conditionals. So what is conditional? A conditional is a situation where you want one or two things to happen, or something happens and you need to know how to deal with it. All right, so an example could be the user enters a number. Now, if this number is greater than 10, we're going to do one thing. If it's less than 10, we're going to do something else. All right. It may also be the case where you ask the user a question like, hey, do you want to continue playing the game? They may say yes, they may say no, and we got to figure out how to do it. So a conditional is simply a decision that has to be made. All right. So here right now what I have my notes. So here are all the notes. You should go through this section, the conditionals, in a fair amount of detail and read through them just in case I missed something in this video. All right. So what we have here is we have two types of statements. We have the switch statement and the if statement. We're not going to be doing anything with the switch statements just yet. There is a time and a place for them, and we will be discussing them in the future. However, we're going to be talking about if statements a lot. All right. So an if statement results in either a true or false situation. So what I've done here is I've created a very simple console application, and what we're going to do here is we're going to add some information to it. All right, so let's add two doubles. So we go double my num equals 4, and again remember that the first letter in the first word is lowercase, and any word after that should always be uppercase when we're making variables. Double, let's go num2 equals 7. All right. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to write an if statement. So an if statement, we simply write if, then we have an open bracket. Now this is where you're going to put your conditional, all right, or your condition. If something is true, do this. If something is false, do that. All right, so if we go back to the notes, you're going to have something called a Boolean expression. So this is an expression that evaluates to either true or false. If you're using a Boolean variable, you can just simply put the variable in there. If it's true, the code will run. If it isn't, the code will not run. All right, so if, let's say, my num is smaller or less than num2, write the first, oops, I need the console.writeLine, console.writeLine, the first number is smaller. All right, now we have the first number smaller. Now what we're going to simply do is add a console.read key. And so we have console.read key so we can see what happens. When we click start now, what happens is the program runs, and we're just going to wait for it. It's still compiling. It takes a little while the first time we run any program, don't forget. All right, so it runs. Let's see, ready? There we go. All right, so it runs here, and let's wait for it. It says the first number is smaller. Now, why did it say this? Well, because in our code here, my num is 4, and 4 is less than 7, so it runs this code. Now, what happens if we changed it? All right, if we changed it and we put it the other way, well, we click start, program runs eventually, and it just sits there. It does absolutely nothing. Why? Because what the computer does is it goes and it does this line of code, it does this line of code, then it does this here. My num is greater than num2. Well, 4 is not greater than 7, so this code in here doesn't run. So it skips down and just does the console.read key. So we press enter, program ends. Now what happens, so we can put here, the first number is bigger. Bigger. All right, now what happens if we want something to happen if this is not true? So if this statement here is true, this code here runs. If this isn't true, then what do? And we want something to happen, we do an else. So we go else. Now the else doesn't have the normal parentheses, so there's nothing in here. So if this is true, it runs this, and the else doesn't run. If this is false, it does not run this, but it runs this instead. So here we go, console.writeLine. The first number is smaller. All right, so now when we click start, what should happen is it should say the first number is smaller. Let's take a look. And here we go, and it says the first number is smaller. So it runs this. So what's happening here is it makes these variables, and it goes here, is my num, which is 4, bigger than 7? No, it is not. So this code doesn't run. So it skips this code. Then it goes to the else. Well, since this is false, it does the else. Now, so the code here would execute. So now what would happen if I did this here? If I changed the 4 to a 7? Now, the first number is not bigger than the second number. The second number is not bigger than the first number. So we have a situation where nothing happens again. Because, because the statement wasn't true, this one would run here. Now, what we could have is, let's say they're equal. What do we want to happen here? Well, we can do an else if. So we'll go else if. Now, how do we show that two numbers are equal? Well, we can go my num equals num2. All right, open bracket, close number bracket, then we go console.writeLine. These numbers are the same. All right, so we have this here. If we click start, now what should happen, and hopefully it does, is it should write these numbers are the same. And it says here that these numbers are the same. Now, I'm just having trouble with the computer. It's running a little bit slow. So it says these numbers are the same. So what happened here? Well, simply, it made the variables, and I checked this here. Is my num greater than num2? Nope. Else if. So now we have an else if situation here. Since it's not bigger, we're not checking if it's smaller yet, because we know if it's not bigger, then it has to be smaller. But if it's equal, we're doing this. So what the computer does is it checks this statement here. Is this true? No. So it goes down to the next else if. Or it goes, yeah, to the next else if. So this else if is connected to this if. If I had another if I typed in here if I typed right here another if statement, if, and then I did something here, this else if would be connected to this if, not this one. All right. So then what happens is, since this if here was not true, it goes to the else if. Oh, it checks that. Okay, it's true, so it runs this code here. And if both of these were false, it would then go to the else. Now, that is how we make if statements. Now, what else can we do with these things? Let's say we add in another number here. Let's go double my num equals 8. Okay. Now let's say we want to check to see if two things happened. All right, my num3 or num3 equals 8. So what I could do is I could go if my num is equal to num2, then I would want it to do something. But let's say I wanted to make sure also that if num3 is bigger than my num. All right. So what you can do here is you can put an if statement within an if statement within an if statement. So you can have tons of nested ifs, as many nested ifs as you want. All right. Then we can do something like console.writeLine. Two numbers are equal and one is bigger. We could do something like that there. All right. So now when we run this, let's see what happens. We're going to click start. So it says here these numbers are the same, two numbers are equal, and one is bigger. So what happened here is, well, it ran these first set of if statements. If num, okay, so it did this here. Oh, they're equal, so it says they are the same. And then it went down here. Is my num equal to num2? Well, yeah, those two are true. They're both 7, so 7 equals 7. Is num3, is 8 bigger than that? Then yeah, it does this here. So we could do that. All right, and then we could have a bunch of else ifs here. We go else if, and have a bunch of other statements if we wanted. Another way that we could do this, instead of having nested ifs, is we could combine them using Boolean operators. All right, so we could do something like this. If we have if my num equals num2, And then we use something called the ampersand. A double ampersand means and we would go num3 is greater than my num. All right. Now here we're going to go console.writeLine. Hello. All right. So now when I click start and I run the program, all right. So when we run the program, it also prints out this hello. So what that's trying to show you here is there's multiple ways to do it. We can have nested if, so you can put an if within an if, or we can use the ampersands for and, so this means that both of these have to be true. Now there are other things, like let's say we wanted only one to be true. Well, we have the or. So this is the straight line, two straight lines. Usually it's just above your enter key or your return key. All right, and this means or. So one of the two statements must be true. We have and, which is the ampersand. This is and. Both of the statements must be true for the code to execute. So if I use an or here, what happens is it would check this one here. If this one was true, it would then just go straight and run this code. If this one was false, it would then go check this one here. And if this one was true, then it would run it. If they were both false, then it wouldn't run. Since we're using an and, both of them have to be true. So what happens is the computer checks this here. If this is true, it will then check this one here and check, oh, this is true too. All right, so then we must do the code. If this first one was false, it won't check that and we'll just skip over the code. All right, so I've also added this stuff in here. So we have the and, we have the or, then we have the exclamation mark, which is the not. So if you want to do like the inverse or the opposite of something, you would just do a not symbol. So if you want to say while not true, you would do this here. So in that situation, you might have a game where the person is, do you want to play again? And while play again does not equal false, so it's not true, then run it. Okay. Some other things to have or think about is we have this thing called thread.sleep. All right, and this just makes the computer stop doing what it's doing. All right, the thing with thread.sleep though is that you need to add one of these using statements up here. So we need to import, so we're using system.threading. All right, and now to make the computer sleep, so we can make it sleep between these two here, we can go thread.sleep. And we put in how many milliseconds we want. So let's put 2,000 milliseconds. So it should equate to about 2 seconds. So now what happens is when I run the code, you'll notice that it should start up. Then it waits 1, 2, and it prints it off there. All right, so that's how we use thread.sleep. So we've talked about our if statements. We've talked about if else. We've talked about nested ifs. We've also talked about how we combine them. Now, can you combine more than two things here? Absolutely. You could have 5, 10, 15 of these ands and ors and nots. All right. One thing you might want to consider, just to make sure you're doing what you're hoping for, is let's say I did this here, and I did an or, and I have my num is bigger than num2. Now, what I want to happen is I want this, and this, or that. So to do that, I'm going to probably need brackets here. Let's put brackets around this. That will do it in the order I want it to do it in. All right. I can also put brackets the other way. If I wanted this part here to be done first and then add the and in, you can do that. All right. So brackets do matter. Think about what do you want to do. Remind yourself of BEDMAS, all that type of stuff there. Okay. So let's go back to the notes just very quickly here, and let's make sure that we've covered everything that I've wanted to cover with you guys. So yeah, we've talked about thread.sleep. And that is about it for conditionals. All right, so if you have any questions about conditionals, make sure you ask. Send me a quick email, all that type of stuff. If something's unclear, just send me an email and I'll try to clear it up. So I hope this all helps. Have a great day, and I will see you guys later.